several questioners say that in the movie JFK, during the trial scenes, an illustration used to show the course of the third bullet, I guess the magic bullet, seems incredible. It shows it taking a lot of twists and turns. Did that bullet take the course described by Costner? Was there a fourth shot?
Well, that's the testimony of the 20th doctor. But I'll tell you, since you've asked the question, I'll tell you how this single bullet theory developed. I was a young trial lawyer from Des Moines, Iowa, Washington. The last thing in the world you want to do is to spend months there and come up with the same conclusions as the FBI, that the first bullet struck Kennedy, the second bullet Connally, the third bullet Kennedy. And I followed Earl Warren. I left no stone unturned to find the truth. Well, in the Zapruder film, we numbered each frame in slides. The fatal shot was frame 313. You couldn't see when President Kennedy was first hit because his head disappears behind a freeway sign, and it reappears at a frame with his hands coming up to his throat at frame 225. The camera ran, we had the Zapruder camera, ran at 18.3 frames a second. So if Kennedy was doing this at frame 225, maybe half a second earlier he was hit, say around frame 215 or 216. You couldn't see exactly where Connally was hit. Now, Connally basically says that he was hit by the second bullet. I reasoned that if I could prove that the rifle could not be fired fast enough to have one rifleman do it all, we had the rifle that the FBI said at that time couldn't be fired faster than 2 1/4 seconds. It actually could, but they told us 2 1/4 seconds. You multiply 2 1/4 times 18.3 frames a second, that's about 40 frames. But you couldn't tell, even with the best photography experts in the world at the time, where Connally was hit. One weekend, I used to go home to Des Moines every other weekend, but one weekend I was working and all of a sudden I got a great idea. Governor Connally's physicians all agreed that he was hit by one bullet. JFK doesn't ever tell you that. The bullet entered his back, exited his right chest, went through the back of his wrist, exited the front of the wrist, and a superficial wound in the leg. And I said he had to be sitting in a certain position to take that wound. And so I contacted Secret Service in Dallas and I said, have Governor Connally's physicians reconstruct his position to show how he had to be sitting to take the wound that he did. And they did that, and I got back with the Zapruder film, and I said, okay, where could he be sitting in this film to take this kind of a hit? And lo and behold, commencing at around frame 200 or so, he could take the hit, or 210, whatever it was. But he couldn't take the hit after frame 240. And if Kennedy was hit at frame 215 or 220, and Connally was not hit after frame 240, and if the camera ran at 18.3 frames a second, a maximum of a second or a second and a quarter, there had to be a second gunman. And I called home that night to my wife. I said, Connie, I think I've done it. I think I've proved there was a second gunman. Well, the only thing wrong was that there wasn't any sign of the bullet that went through President Kennedy's neck. And so we did some wound ballistic tests through the Edgewood Arsenal. What happens to a rifle bullet that passes through a neck this way? How fast does it enter? How fast does it exit? We used goat meat and 20% gelatin compound, different experiments. It entered about 1,900 feet a second, exited at 1,800 feet a second. At that speed, it had to either cause great damage to the car, which it didn't, or hit someone in the car. Well, then we reconstructed the motorcade frame by frame down Dealey Plaza, and lo and behold, commencing around frame 27, 210 or thereabouts, through a single lens reflex camera with the rifle scope, Connally and Kennedy are right on line. And so I had to conclude that my second gunman theory was no good, and that the bullet indeed that went through President Kennedy's neck struck Governor Connally. That's the way it happened. That's the way the single bullet theory developed, and Arlen Specter was the one that examined the doctors to help develop the theory. I suppose if I never would have done this, who knows what would have happened today, but that's what happened.